Tasha Hunter is an Air Force veteran with a master's degree in public administration and social work. She's a licensed clinical social worker and resides in Goldsboro, North Carolina, with her husband and daughter. She specialises in the treatment of PTSD, depression, anxiety and stress, and works to eradicate the stigma of mental health by speaking to others at workshops and seminars about trauma and mental health related topics. Driven and well-informed by her personal experience, her mission is to spread awareness about complex trauma and to give survivors a safe space to heal. Her practice integrates mental, emotional, spiritual and physical health. Today she talks very openly about the subject matter of her memoir, What Children Remember, but she also talks to us about how she wrote the story, how long it took her, and all the things that she thought about. And in particular, editing. She spent a lot of time making sure that she got the right editors for her book because she wanted to make sure she had the best product she could possibly put together. So find out and be inspired by Tasha Hunter today. Welcome to the Turning Readers into Writers podcast, where we teach beginner writers how to find the time and the confidence to write their first novel. I'm your host, Emma Desi, and I'm very excited that you're here. Thank you for joining me today, because if you've been longing to write your novel for forever, then this is the place to be. Think of this as your weekly dose of encouragement, of hand-holding and general cheerleading as you figure out how you're going to write your first novel. Trust me, as a mum of 3 young kids, I know how tricky it can be to tuck some time aside for yourself on a regular basis. And even when you do find that spare 5 minutes, you can feel so overwhelmed that no writing gets done. Trust me, I have been there, but this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because once a week I'll be delivering an episode that gives you steps to building a writing routine, encouragement to build your confidence, and cheerleading until you reach the end. Okay, let's start. Well, Tasha, thank you very, very much for joining me today. I'm delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you work and where you live and what you're up to.
So I am originally from Little Rock, Arkansas. I currently reside in North Carolina, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am in private practice, and my target population, my niche, so to speak, are 2 areas. One is adults who have experienced childhood trauma. And I'm really specific in terms of, working with people that have childhood trauma. Most of my population are what we call caretakers, helpers, medical providers, nurses, teachers, hairdressers, people that are in the helping profession in some way or another, and then women who have experienced infertility. So those are the 2 groups of people that I mainly work with.
Ah, okay. Now that kind of leads quite nicely into your memoir, What Children Remember, because I believe that is, it's a memoir, so it's based on your life story, and you also experienced kind of childhood trauma. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the memoir and what prompted you to share your story.
Sure. I believe it was Toni Morrison that said, if there's a book that hadn't been read or that hadn't been written yet, so to speak, I guess I'm paraphrasing, then you write it. And I've read a lot of books, and I just couldn't find anything that was really honest, especially as it relates to mixing faith in God, spirituality and trauma, and really being able to be honest and authentic and vulnerable about exactly how the trauma impacted the person without this. Sometimes I think there's a pressure for people who write memoir to have a happy ending.
Right. Yes.
and to make it seem like it's all good, I'm okay. And so I wanted to really capture the impact from childhood into adulthood, the impact of childhood trauma, and really explore post-traumatic stress syndrome and what that looks like in a 6-year-old, in an 8-year-old, in a 10-year-old, and all, basically the entire lifespan, what that looked like. And I hadn't seen, again, I read a lot of books, and I wanted to write it from my perspective, and also from this perspective of being a Black woman, because, from my experience, that's not something that we really talk about a whole lot.
Okay.
And I wanted my story to be told, and not just for my story to be told, but my experience isn't that unique. There's a lot of adults that go through all kinds of trauma during childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I have lived with the belief that that pain can be purposeful.
Right.
And so I'm not the kind of person that says, oh, everything happens for a reason. I think that's really ridiculous. To say, oh, well, you lost your child, everything happens for a reason, or, oh, you were abused, everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that, but I do believe that everything that we experience in our life, if we want to, we can use that for a greater purpose. And for me, that greater purpose, and the reason I wrote my book, is to say to a young woman that's gone through some things similar to myself, you're not alone. And hey, by the way, you can get through this. You can absolutely heal from this and have a good life no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you happy to tell us a little bit about the story that, what happens in the memoir, what the topic that you are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and thank you for asking. So, basically, I'm going to, I guess, give you the short of the long, is that I often say that I was born in the wilderness, and my first language was pain.
Oh, okay.
And so as it relates to childhood abandonment, childhood neglect, child abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, I experienced it. And I was born to a woman who told me she did not want me and wished she would have aborted me. Mm. She told me that many times throughout my life. And so I grew up very much feeling unloved and being told I wasn't loved, mm-hmm. in a number of ways. And so that was at 6. By 8, I was sexually abused and had experienced physical abuse. By the age of 10, I started walking to the school bus and praying for God, praying to the heavens. Hey, I'm 10. I've been experiencing this pain, this wilderness for 10 years. Can I come to heaven now? Aww. Can you release me from this life? I want to go to heaven. Whatever that looks like, I want to be there. And just saying to God, I'm done. And I was only 10 years old, praying this prayer as I walked to the school bus. By 21, I said to God, okay, I am done. And I attempt to kill myself. I shot myself. And according to the surgeon and the ER docs and nurses at the time, they said that the doc specifically said to me that the bullet was 1 inch from my heart. And the bullet was designed to mushroom, and what happened instead is it didn't mushroom. It didn't hit my vital organs as it was designed to do. It got stuck and traveled downward in my body.
Wow.
So here I am today. Here I am. And at 21, I had not even begun to live my life. So yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I'm so thankful that this thing happened, this fluke happened, and I'm still here. And so now this has been 20 years ago that this happened. I'm 41 this year, and being a mental health therapist and working with people who are right at the brink and they're thinking, I have no reason to live. Mm-hmm. Talking to a child that comes from a home where there's serious neglect and abuse and saying, keep living, keep living. It means a great deal to have experienced that same thing. Mm-hmm. And to be living proof that you can get through it. Does the pain go away? No, it doesn't go away. But I can still have a good life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I can learn, because my first language was pain, if I can learn pain, I can also learn purpose, and I can also learn the language of hope. I can also learn the language of love, mm-hmm. which is what I needed most.
Yeah. Oh, that's well, it is. It's such obviously a very tragic story, but also very uplifting, because here you are, still here, still helping other people. So in your book, you talk about some very, very challenging subjects, and you have a family now. So how did you negotiate that, writing and putting out in the public sphere something so traumatic?
Awesome question. Because so with everything that I shared, there were certain aspects of my history that I just didn't know how people would react. And I imagined that there would be a lot of mumbling, like, oh, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she's sharing this. She should have taken that to her grave. I could imagine the faces of people that would kind of judge me for sharing my truth. Mm-hmm. But sharing my truth was really a matter of life and death for me. I didn't want my story to die with me. Mm-hmm. And so me sharing my truth and encouraging and helping other women trumped the shame. It trumped the fear of judgment, the anxiety over, oh my God, what's going to happen. My family, most of them understood. I had to reach out to some of my family to get, facts regarding my history, because I couldn't remember everything. Mm-hmm. And I told them, I'm writing a book. And so they didn't know what that meant. I don't come from a family of people that do things like that. And so I don't know that they understood it or really felt that I was really serious about it. So, and that's okay, with the fear of what are people going to say? How am I going to be judged? I just kept writing. I knew that, in the grand scheme of things, that their opinions wouldn't really matter, because they're not really that important. So I don't know how a nice way to say that. Because I left home, Emma, I left home at 17.
Right.
I don't come from the kind of family where it's really close knit and where I would really need to be concerned with people. I think I would still write it even if it was a close knit family. So I left at 17. I'm estranged from my abusers and anybody that would think negatively of my story. I'm estranged from. And then when I published my book, there was so much anxiety, because I speak about my questioning faith, questioning Christianity, which was scary, questioning, just even speaking about my suicide, which a lot of people didn't know. And I also talked about my sexuality. And so those were the things that I was like, oh, what are people going to say? What are they going? And since then, I've gotten support from the places where I knew I would get support from. Mm-hmm. And then I've gotten a lot of positive from family that said, wow, you really hit the nail on the head. Wow, mm-hmm. This is beautiful. And so even for them, it's been some healing that took place in their own lives from just reading my story and being able to verbalize the things that I experienced, which is some of what other family members also experienced in some way or another.
Yeah, I think that is why memoir is so important. I mean, there's a good example from you in one family. Many members of the family are going through something and they don't know the others are. And when we feel so alone, and we see somebody else's experience in black and white, then we begin to realize, oh, it's not just me. I'm not mad. I'm not bad. I don't deserve this. It's so empowering. I love memoirs, especially when, there is not necessarily a message or a sort of moral at the end of it, but it does just give people hope. And I'm absolutely sure your story does that for many of the people that you work with.
Absolutely.
Now, in kind of writing the story, and because the subject matter is so very challenging, I'm wondering if there were aspects of your life story that, although they were perhaps a big part of your story, you felt either they're too sensitive to write about, or that they didn't fit with the narrative of the story that you were telling.
Yes, sense. Absolutely. When I first started writing, I didn't know that if it would be a full memoir. I consider myself to be kind of a rebel, so I didn't want to follow the writing rules, so to speak, or the industry standard. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to put some meditations in there. I wanted to add some poetry, and then there were other parts of my story where I shared about the abuse, but sometimes it was like, okay, we can cut that off here. We don't need to know every single instance of abuse. Mm-hmm. Or there were things about certain family members that in the earlier versions of my writing, I shared and then later redacted all of that, took all of that out because it wasn't my story to tell. They weren't my experiences.
Right.
And so, I kind of questioned what's the purpose of adding this? Good editors will help you do that as well. And so I had really excellent editors that helped me to figure out what to keep and what to take away. When I speak, I'm sometimes redundant. And so, again, good editor said, oh, you said this several times, take this out. But yes, there were several parts of my story that ended up not being in there, mainly regarding the abuse, because how much can one person handle, reading? Mm-hmm. Because it's a lot. It's a lot. And so for my first and only book, I don't know if I'll write another one. We'll see. It's a hefty memoir. It's over 300. It's like 340 pages.
Okay.
So I had to take a lot out.
Yes. But I imagine writing that first draft of it and just spilling your soul out onto the paper, I imagine that was very therapeutic just in itself, even if later down the road you had to take stuff mm-hmm. out.
It was so therapeutic. Years ago, I used to blog. So I had this blog that I would kind of write on, and it was anonymous. I didn't tell anyone. I had some followers and I just kept it to myself. And I've always been a person that journaled. So I had lots and lots of books that I journaled my thoughts in. And in 2016, I decided I'm going to just write this book. I'm going to write it. So I went back to my blog. I went back to my journals and, just kind of looked to see what's there. Emma, can you hold on? Let me make sure I answer that question. What did you ask me again? I don't want to lose the.
Yes, just whether there was elements of your story. Oh no, just that last bit was about how therapeutic it must have been, or cathartic.
Oh yes. So I've always been a person that, when I used to have my blog, I remember writing a post and a journal entry, and I wrote, when I'm not speaking, I feel like a stuffed pig. With the apple in the mouth, really bound, stuffed with all kinds of goodies that I just can't get out.
Right.
And so it's important for me to speak. It's important for me to write. I've been doing this, keeping a diary kind of a thing since I was a little girl. So it is extremely therapeutic. That entire, again, just like you said, even the stuff that didn't really make the cut, at the final product, it was really therapeutic for me to just write it down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the additional validation of I utilized for my book 5 different editors, and to have them, more specifically, 2 out of the 5, to really validate my experience, even in them just editing my work, right. Just being able to read it and say, wow, you're so strong. Mm-hmm. I can't believe you lived through that. These are my editors. And for them to even validate my story, it was all very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, because from what you said earlier, did I understand correctly that your family is not a family of readers and of books?
I mean, I don't come from a family of, no, I read a lot growing up, but in the toxic and abusive home that I grew up in, books weren't that big of a deal.
Because that's what I'm wondering, where your passion, first of all, your passion for reading as a child, but then also finding that tool of journaling. How do you think you found that?
Oh my goodness. I had an aunt that, her name was Faye, and she introduced me to Dr. Maya Angelou, Why Do Caged Birds Sing? And she introduced me to poetry, Langston Hughes, Dr. Maya Angelou, Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, E.E. Cummings, Emily, I think Robert Frost, Emily Dickinson. There's so many. I could go on and on.
A real mix.
It is a huge mix. And she introduced me to poetry and to just this way that poetry is just really honest in and of itself anyways. At least that's what I believe. And it's just a different way of getting your thoughts out. And it was during that time when I couldn't speak to the people that were closest to me, I would write, and I would write poetry. That was my outlet. And I didn't announce it. I didn't tell anyone this is what I do. It's the only thing that I had, as a way to get things out of me and kind of to paper. It was really therapeutic at a young age.
Yeah, your Aunt Faye, she must have recognized you needed it.
She did. And then I had another aunt that her name's Renee. And my Aunt Renee, she said, I was in high school, and she said, you should write a book. And she said, and when you write it, make sure that you copyright it so no one steals your stuff. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And so I didn't take it seriously at all. I just was like, I can't write a book. I don't know anything about writing a book. Well, lo and behold, look at me now, right?
Well, now talking about writing books, I want to get practical with you now.
Sure.
you have a very full-on job. You work with a lot of people who need you. You have a busy life. So how did you manage your time so that you could make space for the writing in your life?
So what I did is I kept a journal in my purse, in my car, everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I made time every day, every moment, because inspiration would come to me while walking. Inspiration would come while driving. Inspiration would come while reading another book or watching a movie. And so I made a promise to myself that when inspiration arrived, I would write it down. Whatever would come to mind, I would write it down. Mm-hmm. And that is what worked for me. And just making time every day, whether it's first thing in the morning at 4 a.m. or making time at night at 8 p.m., once the house is settled down and dinner is cooked and everybody else in my home is taken care of. Mm-hmm. Making time. And I was really quite religious about doing that. Just, mm-hmm. I needed that structure because without structure, I'm not going to get anything done. So I stuck with it. And I made a promise to myself that when inspiration arrived, so that I wouldn't lose the thought or lose whatever, I would, if I'm walking, if I'm, taking a jog or something, I would record myself speaking about the thing that I want to write about.
Excellent.
And so, I stuck with it. And I knew because, anybody that's a creative, you just never know when inspiration is going to come. For me, it could be 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And I imagined, here's the other thing, Emma. I would imagine speaking to Oprah, which I have a whole chapter in my book dedicated to my love of Oprah. And she journaled a lot throughout her life. And so I have that similar thing. And so I would say, I'm going to be like Oprah. Oprah doesn't sleep a lot. She would talk about waking up at the wee hours of the morning and getting to work or writing or meditating. And I would do the exact same thing because I wanted to make sure that I captured it all. Again, even if it didn't make the final cut, mm-hmm. At least I got it down somewhere and maybe it'll be useful later on. You never know.
Yeah. So it sounds then that you didn't write the memoir linearly, that you wrote it sort of as and when a subject or an idea hit you, and then you pieced it together at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your editors, that you had 5 editors. Wow. Mm-hmm. So how did you find your editors?
So I had a list of maybe 50 people that I found in various Facebook groups. There were several editors that I followed on Twitter, on Instagram. And then I had editors that I found on YouTube and on Upwork. And so, not that I researched all 50 because I didn't. I didn't. Let's see. One came from a Facebook group of writers and just people that are editors. And then I think the rest of them came from Upwork, to be honest. Yeah. Well, one came from Facebook, one came from Twitter, and then the other 3 came from Upwork. And so, yeah, that's how I wanted, 5 different women, 5 different perspectives. They had to be women though. Uh-huh. And I told myself, I'm good at, I tell myself lots of things, by the way. And I said, okay, I buy a lot of books on Amazon and from Target, and I want my book as professional as any book that I pay for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whatever I have to do to make sure that when somebody's reading it, they're not like, oh my God, I know she's self-published. Woof.
It's okay. Yeah.
I wanted it to be just as professional as the people that I look up to. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't have their money and I'm not on the New York Times bestsellers list and all of that, I wanted a professional book. So I would do that all over again and even more if I had to.
So I'm curious as well, the editors that you found, did you know that they edited Memoir specifically, or?
That's one question that I had. Yes, because many editors, specialize in sci-fi or romance or, different areas. And I wanted an editor that specifically listed memoir in their profile or in their on their website, that they had experience with memoir. And so, yeah, that was really important. I also looked for editors. It was really important that I'm a communicator. Mm-hmm. So if communication isn't on the top of the editor's list, then that's not going to work for me. I needed editors that wouldn't mind a 20-minute, weekly or biweekly phone call to kind of talk about the feedback, or I needed to hear their voice, or to see in their writing that they could communicate really well with me regarding, how they're doing, with writing things up, or if I had questions. That communication was really, really important. And I had 2 out of the 5 that were phenomenal at giving me. Right. I'm sorry.
It's nice when you find someone that you click with and who you realize gets you and what you're trying to say.
Yes, it was really, I'm handing you over my life, my legacy, a work that's really important. And I would always feel kind of naked every time I handed it over to someone. Mm-hmm. So it was really important to have 2 out of the 5 that understood that level of vulnerability for me, given the topics that I discussed.
Yeah. And
they honored my request to every so often, every week or every blue moon, can we talk on the phone? Can we have a conversation about what you have written up, and how do I proceed based off of your feedback?
Yeah.
Those 20 and 30-minute phone calls, it did it for me. I needed that. And not everybody needs that, but I needed that.
It's relationship building, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
How long do you think that it took you to write your memoir, say from when you first started making your notes through to publication day?
It took me 4 years. It several different changes in the book title. Every now and then I would kind of give up and I would say, oh, nobody wants to hear my story. We've had enough of these stories about abuse. We've had enough sob stories. I'm not going to write another book. Who's going to want to read this? Mm-hmm. And I gave up several times. And even right before, when it was all done, I was with the last editor who proofread my book. I said, I'm not publishing this. I'm not going to do it. And then I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So it took 4 years.
And so I'm glad you did stick with it. And what advice would you have for others who are perhaps in a similar situation to you, that you were in 4 years ago and are not sure if they should do it, and how would you suggest they start?
Mm-hmm. I would say to anybody out there listening and they're wondering, they're wanting to write the book and they're just not sure, I would say stick with it. Someone gave an analogy. I don't remember where I saw it, somewhere on social media. And they said, whenever you think about the fact that, do I have a story to tell? Go to the grocery store and look at the aisle that has all of the different waters. And every manufacturer that has bottled water never thinks, oh, well, someone else has bottled water. I'm not going to make bottled water. And so we have all of these options as it relates to water. And so when I thought about that, I said, you know what, I'm going to write my book because no one has nobody has walked in my shoes. No one has written a book in the way that I am going to write it and telling the story in the way that I am telling it. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, write your book. We need your specific story. And there's someone that's going to read your book, whatever genre it is. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be so glad you wrote it. So write it and make time, whether that's once a day as inspiration sparks, the way that I did, or once a week, once a month. Have a schedule and stick to it. Whatever you do, stick to it. And before you know it, you will have accomplished the goals that you have set for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Exactly. Yes. I'm a big believer in setting those schedules. Otherwise it doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
So Tasha, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Before we go, can you let listeners know where they can find your book?
So for anyone that is listening, my memoir is titled What Children Remember, and it is available on Amazon. It is available in hard copy, paperback, and ebook. And the ebook is available anywhere where you get your ebook. So you can buy that anywhere, but the paperback and the hardcover is available on Amazon. It's What Children Remember by Tasha Hunter.
Fantastic. I should put a link to that in the show notes. That's wonderful. Well, that's great, Tasha. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Before you go, I wanted to tell you about my Patreon page. Whenever anyone supports the show, it expresses just how much you're enjoying the content and how much you want it to continue. Your support helps maintain the podcast and keeps it going. It means I can create better resources for you when you're listening to the podcast or checking out the webpage. It means I can focus on getting a higher reach of audience. And when we get a higher reach of audience, we can get more guests that are really going to help you. And then who knows where it'll go from there. As a new podcaster and someone who's starting out and finding their feet in the podcasting world, just as I'm helping you find your feet in the writing world, I can't do it alone. I always need help, so I'd love it if you would support the show by signing up. There's just one tier, $3 a month, and for that I'll make sure that each week I'm delivering the best podcast I can for you. And as a way of saying thanks, I'll give you a personal shout out on the show. So check out the page at patreon.com/Emma Desi. That's patreon.com/Emma Desi. See you next time.